Twitter, whatever it's called now, LinkedIn. I don't know. We're streaming a bunch of different things, but welcome to Personality Quest. Welcome to all of our Quest members here on the Quest call. Joel Mark Witt, Antonia Dodge, personality hacker, along with Jonathan Harden. Christian Rivera, helping co-host today. Both of these gentlemen are with us, and producing is Karina Gunyon. Today's episode of Quest, this is the December 17th, 2023 version of Quest called The Pathway of Presence. We're going to talk a little bit about showing up to our lives. Now that we know who we are, our personality types, how do we show up as our best selves? How do we show up as the best version of ourselves? We're going to get into that today. We've got a clip to watch for a few minutes and then discuss some of these things here on Quest, get into some inner space stuff, and then also a challenge for the league. One of the things that we assume is that we're all on the assumption we're making is that you, just like myself, Antonia, Jonathan, and Christian, are on the hero's journey of your life. You're on the hero's journey. We're all the hero of our own story, right? And as we go through life, we learn more about who we are, our personality types. We learn about where we're starting from. We learn about the terrain we have to go over to actually navigate life, all the different areas of life. And often we're confronted with three general challenges in our lives. We're often confronted with conceptual challenges, things we need to understand or unpack or learn or know about philosophically or abstractly. But we're also confronted with some inner demons, inner challenges, the inner space in our lives. How do we feel through or think through things? How do we get in touch with who we are inside? And then we also need to take all of those things, concepts, and then the inner space, and then bring it to outer action in our lives. And so these Quest calls, this Quest membership is organized around understanding some of those challenges, working through them, and giving ourselves those action challenges of quests every week to unlock the learning in our lives. So welcome, everyone. How's your week been? Preparing for Christmas, I see? No? There's a little Christmas.
There's a tiny hint of Christmas someplace.
Getting ready to do a little bit of traveling. We're going on a road trip, taking the dog and the hamster along with us. So it's going to be great. And I think a salamander. My daughter adopted a wild salamander. So we have 3 pets now. I don't know what we're going to do about the salamander. I don't think we're going to take it to Texas.
I don't even like a hamster and a dog. Is the dog going to try to kill the hamster on a recurring basis?
No, the dog and the hamster will be fine. We just don't know if we should bring the salamander.
The dog and hamster and lizard sound like a real rock, paper, scissors situation. Like, you gotta look out for them all. They're gonna undermine each other somehow, some way.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, our dog used to salivate and vomit every time we went on a road trip, and it was really awful. But she eventually grew out of it, as I've found little puppies will do. So eventually they grow out of it.
Very good.
All right.
What? No one's had that experience? That's just me.
No.
Yeah, no, my dog used to get car sick as well, but it didn't matter. We took him across country. He was born in Alaska, and then I flew him. I was living in Vegas and flew him. I tried to fly him to Vegas, but it was the summertime, and they won't fly, or at least at that time, they wouldn't fly a dog as cargo because they treat them as cargo when you're not with them in the summertime because it's too hot and they have to sometimes sit in like the underbelly of the airplane and stuff. Yeah. So I actually had to fly him to Denver, Colorado, and then make a road trip from Vegas to Denver to pick him up and then drive him back. And so I drove like the 10 hours, slept in my car, picked him up, and then drove 10 hours back. And so it's kind of ridiculous what we'll do for our dogs. I realized.
Talk about showing up.
Yeah.
We show up for more than ourselves or our children half the time. Right?
I think that's facts. And by the way,
that's why I don't have pets. I want to avoid that altogether. Yeah. I don't like these extraneous things. I remember there's a Tom Papa joke. He's a comedian that he was like, we had this diabetic cat and we had to keep like trying to inject it with stuff, and it would just like keep clawing and scratching. And it's like, if it were up to me, it would just be like, we're just getting a new cat. Like, I wouldn't do that for my wife. Like, it's exaggerated for the lulz, but
only if you're hearing this.
Well, that's the beautiful thing is comedians can get away with saying just about anything.
Yeah.
That's their job.
Or at least they used to.
No, they
still they still get away with it?
They're getting better at it.
Yeah.
There's got to be more nuanced.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
they're
their
getting
job.
better at it.
And their job is to perpetually and continually get away with saying anything. And so they have to, I think it's actually a comedian I think it's their fundamental social place. Like they're the court jesters, right?
Yeah.
And so if people are giving pushback against comedians, it's comedians' job to flip everybody the middle finger and say, too bad, that's my job and it's your job to deal with it.
Yeah.
So
Heather says comedians are prophets in the chat.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, basically.
By the way, welcome everyone. If you're just joining us, the Quest membership, we just did a deep dive Quest experience a couple days ago. Jonathan actually guided us all through. It was actually a really cool experience. If you missed it, we were able to do a 90-minute role-playing game together. And we were experimenting with doing role-playing storytelling where we do breakout rooms, we come back together and we'd unpack a story as we went. Because what we want to do is we want to start to apply this toward personal growth concepts, like maybe shadow work or persona work. Some of the things that we deal with in our lives in inner space work, we're hoping that maybe some gameplay and some role-playing can actually be used as a tool to unlock imagination and intuition, but also maybe work on actual concepts. And through a gameplay, we can see maybe aspects of ourselves we couldn't see otherwise. Did you, Christian, I know you were there and there were some other people on the call, but a lot of people missed because they, it was the middle of the day on an extra call for Quest membership. What was that like for both of you? Jonathan, what was it like leading it? Christian, what was it like for you in exploration?
It was really interesting to, first of all, experience this form of improvisation that comes from the NJ mind.
Yeah.
Like I think of improv as like zany and like just throwing stuff out there, but Jonathan brings this kind of improvisational like framework that was really powerful to allow everyone to contribute to. And then it's through that contribution of particularly this group of people who are growth focused, who are into personality types, like those themes just kind of come through, but it's not all serious stuff. It's playful. There's interesting ideas. We throw a bunch of stuff out there. So it's not limited to just sticking on a specific thing. It's like, let's try stuff. Let's see what works. Let's go through it. And it was really fascinating. And, Jonathan being the one leading it with like, you have so much experience leading, D&D games and stuff like that really came to the forefront and showing how natural you were at doing this. So it was really lovely. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, totally. And I was giving it some thought afterwards because of course, like, you first start something like this and people are like, what is even going on? Why are we doing this? Right. As if fun is always relegated to very small chunks of time and we have to keep it in its place and fun is not allowed to like get outside of its place. But I started thinking as adults, we have so much trouble making decisions sometimes. Like we're just unsure of like how will this impact things? And there is an amazing documentary that Joel forces everybody to watch basically when they come to our house, which is called Spaceship Earth. And it's about John Allen and his team. And they're the ones who created Biosphere 2 in the 90s, if you're old enough to remember the Biosphere 2 thing. And a major part, the documentary is incredible because you see this ragtag group of people just building things. They're just like, they just take on the next ambitious project. So they like built a commune and then they built an actual ship, even though none of them knew anything about, ships. And then they like just perpetually continue to build and build and build until finally they got to Biosphere 2. And one of the things that they said that was crucial is role play and gameplay. Because they said theater, basically. And they said the reason why is because you're basically role playing out all of your fears, all of your hesitations, everything's throttling you, everything that you're worried about. You start role playing it and game playing. It's kind of like it gets out of your psyche. And now it's no longer binding you and holding you down. And I started thinking, how much better decision making would we make as adults if we allowed ourselves to role play it out or game play it out or stretch our imagination through something that's a simulation and not think of it as just R&R or think of it as like, okay, this is my fun time now, half an hour allotted for whatever. It's like we didn't evolve to be working all the time. We evolved to have a lot of free time on our hands when we were hunter-gatherers. And all that free time, what did they do? Did they just sit around eating twigs or did they like actually go do stuff? And that's where storytelling and oration came from, like all of that to entertain ourselves. And I'm like, I bet we started out having more fun than not. As a general rule, like if we could get away with it. And but we deny ourselves this. I know I'm going on a soliloquy, but we deny ourselves this ability to have fun as adults when really there might be like really important concepts that live in fun and role play and games that we can transfer like one-to-one to our lives. It creates a situation where we have lowered stress because we've already worked through it and our unconscious mind is like, okay, I guess we already saw the worst case scenario, so let's go forward. Or I made this decision when I was really hesitant, I was split, and this is how it led. And that kind of gave me an idea for my real life. And it just exploded in my mind, Jonathan, how incredibly important that kind of thing is and how much we deny it to ourselves as adults. So anyway, okay, that's my little.
Or even then we'd like end up using it as a means to get back to work.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
Yeah.
like you said, like this allotted period of time. And like right now, I feel like joy and play is like rebellion. And I've always been rebellious, you know?
Yeah.
So to me, just like accessing joy is like, yeah, I get to do both. I get to be joyful and rebellious at the same time. And it's double exciting.
Yeah. And Mike said in the chat in the Quest Club, he's like, isn't our lives a simulation we decide to play? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid way of saying things.
I think, I mean, and yeah, Antonia, you said everything so wonderfully, because I want to say maybe about 8 years ago, I decided to make fun a part of my life. And for me, it was an absolutely transformational experience. And I finally caught myself, I think I wouldn't even say like even maybe 14 years ago, I was leading a youth group and told everyone, guys, we're going to get serious about having fun. And if you know anything about teenagers, they're just going to mock you to no end. And in that moment, they mocked me. They like, get serious about having fun, really? And even my wife, she made fun of it. And I realized, man, I've got a lot of work to do around fun. And so it's been this wonderful journey of admitting that, no, I have not made room for fun and play. And what the byproduct was I was losing faith and I was losing my sense of wonder. And so I became on this quest to find the intricate link between faith and fun. And I think children do both of those things very well. As a child, I had no problem talking to imaginary creatures. I had imaginary friends. I lived in this wonderful world and I was happy. And there was, of course, chores and things that have to be done. But I realized getting older, I had this unconscious rule that I had to sacrifice all that and give it all up.
Yeah.
And so even though this, I mean, what I've done with the role playing, I do preface it, it's not beer and pretzels, just goofing off. Like I'm really believing that we can accomplish something meaningful.
Yeah.
But it's still, you got to bring the fun to the table, and you got to, if you feel dumb, you're probably doing it right.
Yeah.
So it was,
what a great quote.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you feel dumb, you're probably doing it right.
Yeah.
I'm tweeting that right now.
You know, I could always tell when the sports teams that are gonna make it to the end are the ones that are enjoying themselves the most.
Yeah. Good pattern.
You know, it's like when the teams are like they have good camaraderie with each other, they're enjoying themselves, they're playing the game because it's joyful. Obviously, they're enjoying it because they're winning probably too, but it's like a cyclical thing. They're winning because they're enjoying themselves, and they're enjoying themselves because they're winning.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like eventually to transition to like showing up. It's like showing up is often assumed to be this like serious, you have to show up to change the world and focus and do things in a particular way, but really like showing up is being in integrity with yourself and knowing what brings you joy and accessing flow and accessing that more often to be able to show up to what you need to show up to more regularly and more often, you know. So hopefully this clip will convey some of that, but if you get a chance to listen to the full episode when it comes out, you'll get a greater sense of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So let's attune to that. Christian was a guest on the show. We're not going to show you the full episode today, just a short clip of a few minutes, just to tune into some content today to kick off some of the discussions here on Personality Quest. In this clip, we're going to talk about the emergence of life purpose. So a lot of people go through life going, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to direct my energies? And in this short series, we're talking about the idea of growing up, waking up, cleaning up these aspects of ourselves. And we're getting to this final piece here about showing up, the contribution piece of life, the purposeful end of life. And this clip we want you to watch. Stay tuned to the end because we want to have a quick discussion about it afterward. What's coming up for you as you're watching it live with us. And then we're going to go into some, for the Quest members, we're going to go into some breakouts and discuss this even further, deeper down. So we'll be back right after this clip here on Personality Quest.
What I love about the show up element is it's hard to stay a fantasist because this is your output time period. In your input, even though there is input output in the other ones, you know, grow up has input output connotations because as we talked about before, our persona, which is our interface with the outside world, has to be a part of the grow up experience. And I think even wake up, you have to receive feedback from the outside world. And then you do things and then the world gives feedback. So there's some output there. And in cleanup, oftentimes there's output, right? Some output, but most of the time it's still focusing on the self. In show up, this is when you now turn your attention to your impact and what you're going to be doing in the outside world. And the outside world is, reality doesn't coddle us, right? Reality is very harsh, actually. And so it's hard to stay a fantasist in the show up time period, which is why I think it's such an important part of recalibrating all the previous levels, right? Show up is going to force us to go back into, it's going to probably cause a lot of wake up. It's probably going to cause a lot of cleanup. It's going to help us with the grow up because we're going to watch ourselves do a bunch of stuff that we're like, maybe I shouldn't be doing that anymore. I don't know. And so show up is a crucial element of all of this. And also, I think the two other pieces is not only does it remove the shoulds and the fantasies, I think it also, it is where we get to see ourselves manifest the work that we have been involved in, is what I hear you say. Yeah. It's an emergent, right? It's
the musical performance we've been practicing for all along.
That's exactly. Yeah.
It's the recital. Finally, we get to demonstrate our proficiency or competence or overcoming.
Yeah. And I think it's actually, when I think about it that way, I feel like it might be what a lot of people talk about when they say the word purpose. Like, what is my purpose? And your purpose is to show up after you have done, like after and concurrently with the other work you've done. I think about for myself, I've never known what my purpose is. Never. Like I kind of figured that I didn't have one. And I used to say things like, I think we're serially monogamous with purpose, which is probably accurate. But that was my weasel way of going like, I don't know, maybe it'll show up and then I'll have another one after that. And I want to reserve the right to change it at any moment. And then I did some grow up, I did some wake up, I did some cleanup. And while I was doing that cycle, rinse and repeat, we were also simultaneously showing up with Personality Hacker on a regular basis, right? Running live events, doing coaching. And so I was showing up. It wasn't my purpose yet, but as I showed up and as it reflected back, I actually need to do more grow up. I guess that means I just woke up to something, right? I was like, that was a big one. I have more growth work to do. I have to do more cleanup, right? And as I was doing that while showing up, eventually, bam, this emergent capacity showed up in one of our live events. Yeah. That it was like on a bonus day. It was just like a throwaway. And something happened that I went, I'm tapping into a totally different capacity to show up than I've ever seen before. And it was so rewarding. And it was such an expression of all the other work I had done before. I was like, this is the widget I am. Like if the universe turns us into widgets to do things, this is the widget I am. And so it was totally emergent of the self, as opposed to something I thought I should be doing, something that I thought should have big impact. It has very small impact at this point. Only the people who come to our, like the personality life path really get to experience it. And that's maybe like a few dozen people at this point. But I'm happy with that. I'm so happy with that impact because I don't think it's any less significant, at least for the people that it affects. So for them, it's very significant. And I actually would much rather be able to continue to do that work and truly show up in that way than to have the podcast get huge and have millions and millions of followers and have my voice be, a voice of a generation. That sounds really cool too, but I don't think that's the widget I am. And if it ends up happening, cool, but that's not the widget.
Or at least not yet on the timeline you're on.
At least not yet now.
And if you were to do that might be like that Josh Harris example. Premature. It might be going too far.
That's right.
In what you're actually here to do, because you have work right in front of you to do.
And so I have no expectation of it. Right. And I have no disappointment when it's not happening. Right. And the widget I know what I need to do to resource myself to be able to continue to do that. Yeah. So I find this model, I'm like, I feel like my going through it, and whether or not I knew that that's what I was doing, I feel like on the other end, I'm like, I think I know what that means by truly showing up. I think I understand that because, and the only way I can say it is because I know what kind of widget I am.
Well, okay. So you're tuning into, I think, something else that you mentioned earlier. I want to come back to the idea. So this idea of outer measurement, you can't hide from reality. It's going to be what it is. Like it's going to measure you and what you're capable of, whether you like it or not. And a long enough timeline, right? Like it's going to be reflected back to you what the real is. Yep. So that's the external. And you're talking about but it's important you have the internal too, because if you're only measuring in the outside and the podcast, let's say, gets really big, or you have some channel that everybody's like, oh, you're so amazing, Antonia, you're so cool and attuned, but you find yourself like having to run ahead of it and like you don't really feel connected to it. You mentioned this idea of flow state, which I think is the inner measurement. And you're tuned into that when you talked about, working with people in our personality life path or your personal coaching that you do, or even our profiler training. You're like, I'm in a flow state in that. I know I have an inner measurement of knowing that I'm on purpose. I'm contributing well. I feel good about my contribution. So I think both of those levers, it's an inner and outer measurement of some sort that we need to be attuned to, because the outer measurement, this is, I guess, goes all the way back to the thing I said at the beginning, Josh Harris putting this book out. Do you realize how many accolades he got from his peer group, like people my age? But I would 10X that for the adults in our lives, our parents' generation and grandparents' generation, were like, you are doing the right thing, man. You're doing God's work by getting young people to be, purity focused and all that. Like, they had a bunch of like positive, just keep doing it. They propped him up.
Yeah.
But he probably wasn't maybe as tuned to maybe the flow state or is this really what my values are? Is this exactly, do I have the experience for this? But he was kind of pushed. So you have to be careful if you only take the outer world measurement. It can prop you up and you're not tuned into the self to say, okay, I'm equipped for this contribution. This is feeling good to me. This is the contribution I want to have. You might just be pushed into something and then you find yourself in a place where you're like, I don't even like doing what I'm doing. I don't like contributing this way. I feel burned out. I can't sustain it. I feel fake. I feel like an imposter. Fill in the blank of whatever the story is. Right. So I think those two things are really, really important. I'm glad you said flow state, because I had never thought of that before in that same way. I think that's really key.
Yeah. What you were saying just made me think of this sort of balance between the material and the spiritual. And again, with spiritual, I mean like, awareness of our internal self, the sort of part of us that, I mean, if you talk to people who are in their 70s or 80s, they're like, I don't really feel like I'm 70 or 80. Like there's a part of you that is like ageless and timeless and eternal. And it's like accessing that part of ourselves. But there is a danger of leaning too far in that one direction. If you just like meditate for 8 hours a day and you're not experiencing and being a part of the material world, as much as like the flow state of being able to do, for me, mental wellness open mic nights and being on the podcast and having these kinds of experiences, connecting with you two, it's still something where we're a part of the material world. And like, we have to remember our zip code and we have to remember where we live and we still have to do paperwork and we still have to make money and do all this stuff. Right.
That's true.
That's part of part of the resourcing of it all too. It's like this balance, right? So if we don't get both of those things in order in like a more consistent way, then we're not going to stay in this show up phase. That's why it takes continuous work to maintain that balance between the spiritual and the material.
And this is why personality types come into play here. Because if we want to know what our flow state is, how we know we're basically self-generating this energy and we're able to sustain it, knowing how we're wired, how our mind makes decisions, learns information is key, because it's going to know, we know, okay, that's what my flow state feels like. That's what my flow state, that's what makes sense for me, or how we interpret for our personality. But that's where personality type, I think, really plays into this.
That's a great point, because like I say, I'm a certain kind of widget. And when I would have never imagined the work that we're doing or the work that I'm doing is the widget I am. But when I think about it in terms of my cognition, it's very compatible. It's like basically I'm using my first two functions, my driver and co-pilot or dominant auxiliary, all the time. Actually, I'm using all my functions at the same time, truly. And so because I use all four of my preferred functions in that context, I would have never known that was a context that pulled them all out, but it does. And so knowing your type preferences will give you a clue. It keys you in on the kinds of activities that are probably what your whole self desires for you to be able to do. And the emergent comes from that. But as you mentioned, it takes time. Sometimes it has to be extracted. Sometimes it's like, it just is incidental. You're like, oh, that's the thing, right? I didn't know that, not until I actually got there. And type is so nice for navigating through to go like, am I able to pull the most of me out in the situation? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, I'm very, very fortunate that the thing I'm quote unquote meant to do, at least at this time, also happens to be my career, right? It's my vocation and my career. I don't think it always aligns that perfectly for everyone. Sometimes your contribution is an emergent of your whole self, and you don't get to make money from it, right? And so it has to be something that gets brought out as like you model it, or in in your discretionary time, or as, like there's a lot of people out there that being a good parent, that's the work of their lifetime, and they excel at it. They're beautiful at it. They're not going to get paid to be a parent for the most part, unless they foster children and then they can create a situation like that. But their kids aren't, you're actually paying money for the privilege of doing your your vocation at that point.
Unless you consider a tea party to be payment.
That's right. That's right. Pay in full with a tea party. Yeah. That's right. With stale crackers.
Chutes and ladders.
That's right. But and there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
That said, sometimes it's that's your contribution of whole self. And there's nothing, I don't think that should be invalidated in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
That show up aspect is it's specific to the individual.
Yeah.
And so understanding type preferences is a part of how we understand what that means for us.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to Personality Quest. Joel Mark Witt here, Antonia Dodge, a personality hacker, along with Jonathan Harden, Christian Rivera. Producing today is Karina Gunyon. Welcome all of our Quest members to the Quest call this week. We just watched a clip about life purpose, showing up. Let's have an open discussion about this, and then I want to create some breakout rooms for the Quest members to go into to discuss it in a few minutes. Before we do that, though, what's coming up for you guys Christian, as you rewatch it, and Jonathan, as you see it? Any thoughts, any comments? Antonia, too?
Yeah, the first thing that came out to me is remembering that showing up is also a process unto itself. Showing up means like the reason that this series is really something that is important to listen to all the way through, in terms of like the introductory episode, grow up, wake up, clean up. Show up is after cleanup. Cleanup is, it's shadow work. It's getting to know how the process of doing cleaning up, the process of removing the distortions we've created about how we feel like life is supposed to be or how we're supposed to operate. Showing up is then taking all of that, that cleaned up version of ourselves, showing up to the world, having that reflected back to us, and seeing if we need to make some more calibrations. It's a continual process. And then I love what Antonia said, which is important to remember, is that showing up is not necessarily always about other, and it's not always about making money. It doesn't necessarily have to be aligned. If it's aligned, awesome. That feels like the golden ticket for a lot of people, right? That's what we're trying to get to. But it may not be the case. The widget that you are of what what brings you alignment, what brings you purpose, may be something that doesn't make you money, maybe something that just brings joy by being who you are in the varying contexts that you experience. Your purpose might be to sit on a bench and make people happy when they come across you. I don't know what that would be. That's just a sly example, but that's what comes up for me around that. I'm curious about you, Jonathan.
Yes, I have some things to say during the Quest call, but I was thinking of a way to preface that. I know that the times I've done theater work, one of the worst things you can do is just no call, no show, just don't show up to the performance. And anytime there's usually an understudy that can take your place, but it's such a disservice to the people around you. And I like how you said this is really a time for outer world impact and showing up, even if you're you've done a terrible job waking up, cleaning up, you're barely ready, you're working on minimal sleep. A lot of times just showing up is sending a message to the people around you, I care about you and I care about this. And it's facing your shame and fears of not doing the cleanup work necessarily great. I know working as a nurse, sometimes I don't feel great going into work, but showing up even at 50% sends a message to everyone else that, okay, you value my time, you value our teamwork and our camaraderie.
Yeah, and it's kind of getting to know what it takes to show up, because you said 50%, can I show up at 30% versus 35% or whatever? It's getting to know this organic inner system of what it is that we need to take care of, and what stage of the process is that we need to go through to get us to a higher percentage to show up. And then the willingness to show up in general, to you can practice the violin over and over again, but at some point, are you going to get on stage? Are you going to play it for somebody? You know, are you going to get someone else to witness this?
Mm.
You know, it's a little bit of a willingness to be witnessed after all of this work, especially. So anything coming up for you guys are muted.
I'm muted. I was talking, but I was muted. I think when we show up, we see the chasm between where we want to believe we are and where we actually are. And that reflection back can be a bit jarring the first few times we show up.
Yeah.
It's like I was imagining I was here. And one of the reasons I believe that we don't show up is because we don't want that chasm reflected back to us. That's like a really harsh piece of information for our ego. But when we get it, then if we can like sit with it and like deal with the like, oh, I guess I misjudged. Maybe I overvalued where I thought I was at. If we can take that as data, right? And this is where I think, like in type terms, introverted thinking, it can feel critical, but I've started to think of it as an auditor, right? It's taking an audit, and showing up is where we audit ourselves from where we thought we were to where we actually are. And if we can receive the information of that audit, it almost like gives us a map all by itself. Not always, but sometimes it will give us a map of how to close the chasm. And then the next time we show up, we're like a little closer to that. And the next time we show up, until finally we overtake it and then go beyond. And so showing up, I think, is crucial for like an honest self-assessment, because that's when the world is reflecting back, oh yeah, you're not as far along as you thought you were. Or alternatively, you're actually further along than you were fearing. But you can only get that information when you show up.
Yeah, I mean, I think someone said earlier about like it's all a game, and I think there's a degree of like once you start showing up and it becomes a game of like self-improvement in terms of getting better at being able to show up as your full self. But like, what does it take to continually be in flow state? And that in itself becomes a game, and then interacting with the world becomes kind of a game. Not to not take it seriously and to not engage with the world to be flippant or dismissive, but to show up as like your honest, earnest, integrated self, and have fun with it and experience joy as a result.
Yeah.
Games are serious, Christian. Games are very serious.
Right.
Yeah, we need to have serious fun.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what's so crazy is that when we don't give ourselves an opportunity for fun, to kind of harken back to what we were talking about before the video clip, we find ourselves, I think if we don't stop to have fun, time starts to vanish. We actually lose in some ways, we lose the resource of time. We're not present because fun kind of forces us back into the moment and into the now. And so in some ways, you're devaluing the importance of time in life. And so you have to have the tension point of presence, fun, enjoyment, going like, oh yeah, this is a big part of why I exist at all, right? Is to have this experience. And so it's almost like if you take life too seriously, you're not taking it seriously at all.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're losing what it's about. Yeah. Now, of course, if you're only playing, or if you're giving too much time for play, well then, it's like that's eroding self-confidence. You're not taking life seriously enough. So it's, as usual, it's always the tension point between two things.
Yeah. All right. I think it's time to go a little deeper. Welcome anyone that's just joining us to Personality Quest here at Personality Hacker. So we just watched a clip about showing up and life purpose. I'm going to ask Karina, our producer, to open up breakout rooms here in a moment. We're going to put 3 to 4 people in breakout rooms for all the Quest members here that are part of the Quest call. So if you're just watching this open, if you're part of Quest membership, you're in a Quest call with us right now. We're going to go into breakout rooms and talk about this idea of showing up to our lives. So one of the things we can attune to as we think about showing up is, well, what is it that I can show up well doing with competence, with high output? So here's the question, the breakout room question. I want you to go into your breakout rooms. We're going to put 12 minutes on the clock. Is that right? I think we're putting, what do you have preset? Is it 12 or 15? 15 minutes on the clock. We're going to put 15 minutes on the clock, and we're going to come back in. We're going to hear from a few people after this breakout room session. But in your small group, in the Quest Club membership, I want you to discuss this prompt here with your other Quest. Introduce yourself if it's somebody you haven't met before in the community. And then answer this question kind of in an open format. What's something you do that's easy for you to show up around, but it looks like work to somebody else? Maybe people reported to you like, wow, how do you do that? It looks so effortless the way you show up. What is something that you do that's easy for you, but looks like work to someone else? If this isn't clear, let me give you a couple modifications, like things to think about. What do you suspect it might be? Explore what it might be. It doesn't have to be something that makes you money or some sort of achievement. Example could be parenting, leading or directing others, solving tech problems, explaining difficult concepts, facilitating things. You can also follow the trail of the best compliments you've ever received. So these are some things to tune into, but tuning into the self of where do you think you show up the best? So the prompt is, what's something you do that's easy for you, but looks like work to someone else? We got 15 minutes on the clock. We're going to see everybody back here on the main Quest membership in 15 minutes, and we will start to go deeper unpacking this into the inner space next. See you in 15. You're still with us here on YouTube or X or LinkedIn or wherever else you're watching on the public channels. As all of the Quest members go into their breakout rooms, we're going to end this live stream here in just a few minutes. Feel free, if you want, at home to put into the chat on whatever platform you are on. Feel free to go ahead and put in the same answer to the question about what do you think you show up with. It's easy for you, but other people, it would look like work to them. What is that for you? Put it in the comments, the chat, or the live stream.
What's your answer? I know your answer.
My answer?
What's your answer there?
I don't know what my answer is.
You know what your answer is.
Well, I have a lot of things I think are there. I would say getting up in front of a group of people on a stage and just taking over the room and being able to lead and guide people.
Yeah, you are spectacularly good at that.
Fairly easy for me, yeah.
Yeah, and to everybody else, it doesn't just look like work, it looks like a nightmare. Isn't it like the top 3 biggest nightmares that people have is...
Let me say this one thing. If you want to be part of Quest, by the way, personallyhacker.com/Quest, if you want to be part of that membership group and the discussion groups, thank you. I just want to say that in case people are like, how do I be part of this membership program? I want to let people know that. Yeah. Now we can talk about what you're asking.
Okay. So anyway, the thing you do well is not just work, it's a nightmare to other people.
It is? Yep. Oh, that's right. People have a greatest fear of getting up in public speaking. I am more nervous if I have to actually deliver a talk. Like if I have to give data and actually give points out, I do get a little bit hesitant, nervous. But if you just have a group of people, like hundreds of people in a room, and you go, hey, get all those people, organize them and get a meeting started or get something going. And I don't have to actually teach content. I just have to organize people, especially featuring others, like an MC role.
Yeah, you're such a good MC.
I can do that without any nerves.
Yeah.
Fairly well.
Yeah. I mean, it helps that you've been doing it since you were, what did they say? Knee high to a pig's eye or something.
When I was 15.
Yes, that's right. Because you were very small at 15.
But I hadn't hit puberty yet. So I was like a little pipsqueak.
Yeah.
15 anyway. So it was that.
It's true. He was this big at 15. If you don't know, he's 6'2", which is why we have to, he's actually on a lower stool than I am. We have to go like this because I'm 5'2". So we always have to go like this so that we're not I'm not basically down here. But he's not wrong. He hit puberty late.
Oh yeah.
And so he had his driver's license
before he
hit puberty. So
I'd pull up to the toll booth at the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
And he would be this big.
And they'd be like, young man, are you old enough to be operating this motor vehicle? Like, yes. I'd look like a 12-year-old on the image. It was really embarrassing. It's humiliating.
I think it's fabulous.
It's not, it wasn't.
Probably did something good for your psyche though.
Maybe.
Made
it
sure
definitely humbled me.
Yeah, made sure that you weren't immodest.
Everyone thought I was way younger.
I'm trying to figure out what I do that looks like work to other people.
Is anybody putting in the general comments on YouTube what they're saying?
No.
Is there work?
Well, yeah, there was a couple. I don't think anybody's added to YouTube what they do that is easy for them, but looks like work for other people. So far in the chat, nobody has. But there was quite a few really awesome comments on YouTube around the content itself.
Let's do it. Let's just tune into those for a moment. And again, if you want to be part of our Quest membership, right now, as we speak with you, our Quest members are in breakout rooms talking about this week's episode. We're going to go into the inner space and do some journal prompts, and then we're going to give everyone a Quest challenge for the week on the call to go test in their real life, and they come back and join the membership next week to unpack the learning from it. Yeah. So you should be part of this. Come join Quest with us. It's like $37 a month membership.
It's the most ridiculously priced thing that we do.
It's high touch.
And it's
we do it every week.
A fabulous touch-in point. So if you're not on it,
you need to be joining it. To be part of
May God have mercy on your soul.
Anyway, so let's tune into some of the mercy on your soul.
All right.
We got about 5 minutes left-ish, but let's tune into this before we have to go.
Okay. So a couple of things that were said in the chat on YouTube. So I don't know about the other places that we're streaming because apparently we're blasting it everywhere. But as far as purpose, a person said that sitting on a bench and making people happy is how Eckhart Tolle started on his purpose. So whoever said, I think it was
He still does that.
Yeah, right?
Just the bench on a stage.
Right. Mista says that I feel like my purpose is philanthropy, which is fabulous, right? Another person, Barbara, said that people are afraid they may find out that they made less progress than they hoped. And I think that was when we were talking about showing up in the chasm that can appear. which is a really important. I think one of the best gifts a person can give themselves is the ability to create an honest assessment of oneself and not take it personally, right? To like modestly assess where a person is, and to not think that it means anything about the quality of their character, right? And if a person can get to that point, I think that's like a life unlock.
Yeah.
Like, I think you just unlock so many different things it's really hard. I don't want to undersell it. It's very hard to do. It's so easy when you take an assessment of oneself and you're not, that whole Dunning-Kruger cliff that we all look down, right? Or look up from or whatever. Once you can get to this place though of a modest self-assessment and go, okay, all right, I got work to do, or, ooh, cool, I'm further along than I thought. Man, it's like a life hack all by itself. Yeah. Barbara says entertaining is easy for me. She has ENTP preferences and a nightmare for her husband, ISTJ. Yeah, that makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that 10-year-old or tertiary extroverted feeling harmony that gives you a little more access to the hosting part of you, right?
Oh, I know what my thing is.
Yeah.
I'm really good at having difficult conversations. I'm really good at telling people bad news or telling people like, okay, we need to have a come to Jesus moment or whatever it is. I'm really good at having really difficult conversations. And I didn't know this, but I realized that's also a life hack. The capacity to have really, really important but hard conversations and not kick cans down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget the quote. I don't know the person associated with it, but I'm sure somebody could put it in the comments or the chat or whatever. But I heard the quote that your success, the ability for success in your life, is directly correlated to the amount of difficult conversations you're willing to have.
Mm-hmm.
That just resonated with me when you said that. I'm like, that's probably very true. The hard conversations with ourselves too. It's not just with other people.
Yep.
The difficult conversations. You said that accurate assessment of where I actually am.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard conversation with the self that we have to have.
Yep.
And be like, hey, this is where you're really at, Joel. And like, I don't want to hear that. I want to feel like I'm a little bit beyond, or I'm more than. Those are tougher things to
Although
have,
I feel if that was a 1-to-1 correlation, I feel like I should be further along in my success. Like
maybe it's not. Maybe it's not.
I've had some spectacularly difficult conversations throughout my life. I should be a gajillionaire.
Well, maybe it's like it will. If you don't, it will prevent success, but it doesn't also lead to success. Maybe it's like a prevention.
Maybe.
You have to be willing to have them and do other stuff too.
Yeah.
You can't just like lay in your bed and have difficult conversations and expect to be successful. Like, all day long. You have to get up and actually like work and do other things.
Yeah, all right.
I think that would track, right? Anyway, Joel Mark Witt here with Antonia Dodge for Quest membership here at Personality Hacker. We're gonna have to go because we have a group of Quest members right now. They're coming back from breakout rooms very soon. That we're going to start workshopping some of the things in their lives that are coming up for them in showing up to their personality, to their career, to their relationships. We want you to be part of this every week. We're doing this right now. It's on Sundays, 11:45 Eastern time. We open up our Quest membership and we talk about a certain topic for the week. We unpack it. We apply it to the self. It's a membership program. It's very low cost. You can be part of this every single week. And we're adding more and more elements. Like just a couple of days ago, we did a group role-playing game, 90-minute role-playing game with everyone. And it was really fun. People got to step into their imagination. And we're looking to do more of those kinds of things. We're probably going to start up a book club this coming year for this. There's a bunch of other aspects we want to add into these and this membership program. I want you to be involved. Personalityhacker.com/quest. Get signed up. Starting next Sunday, you can join us live. Join us right now. Sign up right now and join us. At the time of this recording, we're live right now. So come and be part of the Quest experience.
We're going to
love to see you in it. We got to bounce. Joel Mark Witt, Antonia Dodge.